Hey there folks, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and if this is getting back to normal, the normal seems pretty lousy, cause it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. So I've been complaining the past week or two that for a Hot 100 that seems settled or back to normal, there's still a lot of activity, more than you might otherwise expect. But in truth, I shouldn't be that surprised. The reality of things is that the Hot 100 as a whole is weaker right now, in that you don't have a series of mega hits at the top going toe-to-toe, which means that what would normally be smaller fluctuations land a slightly bigger impact on the chart overall. Now, the more concerning thing is that nothing seems to be actually sticking or gaining much in the way of traction, radio or otherwise, but that might be a bigger conversation for down the road, especially given a lot of it right now is not all that good. But before we get to that, what it means for right now is that in our top 10, we don't talk about Bruno by the Encanto cast just spending another week at number 1. Mostly courtesy of the streaming and the YouTube that will not die. Although cracks are starting to show, especially within the sales. But then, getting as high as I hope it ever will, Heat Waves by Glass Animals is up to number 2. It's here in the margins, mostly courtesy of streaming, which allows it to eke out its position above Easy on Me by Adele, which is better than it on the radio, but it's also losing faster. And that blows open the door for ABCDEFU by Gale at number 4. Consistently strong, but the radio gains are really still there, and it doesn't look like it's peaking. And it doesn't surprise me at all that it blew right past Stay by Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber, stranded at number 5, which spent the week slowly imploding on the radio, or Super Gremlin by Kodak Black, stuck at number 6, which has a ton of streaming still, but where that radio run might be too little, too late. Then we saw a slight gain for Shivers by H.E.R up to number 7. Kind of weird given that it spent the week collapsing on the radio. At least makes a little bit more sense that Ghost by Justin Bieber rose up to number 8 given its current radio run. But then we got two songs that are retaking the top 10. Hitting a new peak, we got That's What I Want by Lil Nas X at number 9. Mostly courtesy of very good radio that's a little bit too late to make the most of its previous streaming success. And Pushin' P by Gunna and Future featuring Young Thug at number 10. The meme that I wish would die still has a lot of streaming, even if it's not picking up radio that's worth a damn. So that will then take us to our losers and dropouts here, where in both categories, I gotta be honest, I can just point at a lot of our new arrivals from last week, which really got nothing going. Now, in fairness, we did have some pretty big dropouts here, those that caught no real traction, like Fair Trade by Drake featuring Travis Scott, Message in a Bottle by Taylor Swift. They really counted on that being something in pop. And then I'd probably include Thinking About You by Dustin Lynch featuring Mackenzie Porter, as it looks like it's gonna slip just beneath that year-end list. And Kiss Me More by Doja Cat featuring SZA finally making its exit. But we got a considerable chunk of losers here as well, with the most obvious being the debuts that are just not going anywhere. Cigarettes by Juice WRLD down to 70, Don't Play That by Late King Von and 21 Savage at 68, She's All I Wanna Be by Tate McRae at 67, and Do We Have a Problem by Nicki Minaj and Lil Baby tumbling out of the top 10 down to 32. Then there's the continued losses for Cold December by Rod Wave at 90, and Whiskey and Rain by Michael Ray at 88. Can't really complain that much about either of them here. And then for the rest of our list, yeah, I gotta be honest, it's all over the damn place. All Too Well, Taylor's version slid down to 96. Scorpio by Moneybagg Yo hit 86. Do It To It by A-Craze and Cherish slipped down to 80. Never Say Never by Cole Swindell and Lainey Wilson skidded to 79. And For Tonight by Giveon hit 75. But that's not all here. Freedom Was a Highway by Jimmy Allen and Brad Paisley hit 66. Better Days by Naked, Mae Muller, and Polo G hit 52. And Fingers Crossed by Lauren Spencer Smith looked like the virality's starting to fade at 49. Now, the biggest losers looks like they're probably going to clinch their year-end list spots for 2022, but it might be close. And while I might not care all that much for Love Nwantiti by CK at 36, I do genuinely hope You Should Probably Leave by Chris Stapleton at 44, and especially Smoking Out the Window by Silk Sonic at 35. I hope they get their spots. Now, you would think that there'd be a swath of gains in order to compensate for all those losses, and you would actually be wrong. wrong, because the only gain we got this week was Till You Can't by Cody Johnson at 33. I mean, it's good to see, it's a good song, but something really needs to be filling in the gaps here. Well, turns out a chunk of this week came with big returns thanks to the Super Bowl. Lose Yourself by Eminem at 40, and 2 songs from Dr. Dre featuring Snoop Dogg, The Next Episode at 37, and Still Dre at 23. They'll likely be gone next week, and that'll open up some space for songs to surge in. Well, what the hell's gonna fill that gap, if anything? Well, let's take a look at our newest crop of arrivals, and let's start off with number 95, Stay Alive by Jungkook. This might surprise some folks, but I was kind of curious how the solo ventures of various BTS members might actually wind up panning out, especially as their sound as a group has felt increasingly commercialized and divorced from their more interesting roots, especially on the J-pop side of things. But all that does come with a grain of salt. This song was apparently co-produced by Suga, another member of BTS, and it's reportedly a soundtrack for an original webcomic released by BTS that had some stark parallels to the group. Can't get that far away, can you? Well, alright, whatever. How is this? Well, honestly not bad. Jungkook is certainly expressive on this track, with some inflections that kind of remind me a little bit of The Weeknd. And from what I can translate in the lyrics, I do like the juxtaposition of trying to cling to one's own internal light rather than succumbing to your own weaker nature. It's not that far removed from how BTS normally frames their self-esteem anthem material, the past, in songs like Black Swan. But unsurprisingly, the production is not doing this any favors. The vocals feel really painfully compressed and sharp against the sawing strings, the dreary guitars, and the ponderous percussion, where it feels a lot less like The Weeknd and more like a leftover Zayn song from about 6 years ago. I don't know, to me this feels a lot more targeted with folks already on board with the BTS army rather than the new fans or fans who might be a bit at a distance. That includes me. So, alright, it's not bad, but I'm not sure how often I'm going to go back to it, even if there's stuff I like. Number 89, Closer by Saweetie featuring H.E.R. You know, I was more intrigued by this collab than I thought initially I would be. I've always had kind of a soft spot for Saweetie, even if I'm kind of lukewarm on her music as a whole, but she's got a tendency to work with some R&B acts that I like a decent bit, so I had some expectations, and oh wow! I think they actually met them. Now, I do think it's worth mentioning that it's very obviously trying to gun for the same market share and success that Kiss Me More, with Saweetie taking the Doja Cat lane and her filling in for SZA. But tell me the truth, I might like this just as much, if not more. The light, new disco rollick of the groove is more lush and sensual, leaning a little more on R&B, especially with H.E.R.'s really striking upper register, which allows the song to go into slightly more mature territory while remaining pretty playful. If anything, Saweetie might be the weak link on the song. Not that her horny verses are bad or that she can't sell them, but she doesn't quite have Doja Cat's flair, and that means when we get lines like Da Vinci Dick come paint these walls, they don't quite land as sharply as they could. Still, you know what? I do like this a fair bit. Happy we got it the same week that Kiss Me More left. Let's make this hit too, shall we? Number 83, Good Morning Gorgeous by Mary J. Blige.
Sometimes you gotta look in the mirror and say, Good morning, gorgeous.
You know, credit to Mary J. Blige that she had an album released just ahead of the Super Bowl performance that would serve an audience who might not be initially familiar with her work outside of the old hits, the majority of which actually hold up remarkably well. So alright, this is the title track from that album, produced by H.E.R. and DeMille, and I mean, I get why it was pushed given the production credits and a lot of the content, which is all about being depressed and exhausted, trying to find your self-worth against all of that while you might be on your own. Definitely would make sense to release something in that vein after the past couple of years. But you know, it's the sort of self-esteem anthem where you're not sure it's actually doing the job that it sets out to do, in between her husky, burned out delivery and how the guitars simmer in a lot of minor keys but never seem to catch a moment of release. It's just kind of dour and trudging, and while Mary J. Blige built some of her best songs out of a lot of anger, this isn't really that. It's more resignation, and that's not something that really grips me. Again, she's talented enough to keep this in the realm of quality, but I can't say I like it that much though. That is disappointing. Number 73, Boyfriend by Dove Cameron.
For the shit that he never did. Up all night, I won't quit thinking I'm gonna steal you from him. I could be such a gentleman. Plus all my clothes would fit.
The last time I talked about Dove Cameron on her own, it was for a song from Disney's Descendants, back in 2015. Now, I've obviously touched on her work, given that shocking run the glorified fanfiction series has had, but I haven't really been familiar with her songs outside of Disney. She had a 2-song project back in 2019, a lot of non-album singles, now this catching virality on TikTok, and I kinda get why. Conceptually, it might seem pretty solid. Cameron came out as bisexual, and as seeing some girl getting mistreated by her boyfriend, she inserts herself saying that she could be a better boyfriend than him. The sort of clunky line that nevertheless seems built to go viral. But you know, I think once you get outside the gimmick, it gets kind of ridiculous in a hurry, with the snap beat, the twinkles, and a squonking synth horn to play off the whole let-in bombast, where it's trying to play for some hints of smooth jazz, but in reality, it reminds me of something that would have gone on Riverdale's soundtrack, and that's not always a compliment. I think the song isn't really helped by not really having more to paint the scene, add a little bit more texture. The closing line on the hook of "plus all my clothes would fit," it feels kind of weak to sell the premise of the song, and Cameron's husky delivery is just not all that distinct or special, just kind of oversold for how ultimately it doesn't feel as transgressive as it might seem on the surface. Now, I don't deny it's going to work for a certain audience and it'll go crazy on TikTok, but I'm just not really in either. Just saying. Number 46, City of Gods by Fivio, Kanye West, and Alicia Keys. So given that Kanye has decided he's going to put Donda 2 exclusively on his $200 stem player, I'm not really obligated to cover it all that much, because I'm not buying that player, and I can't see that crossing over onto the Hot 100. Billboard's not going to count it, certainly not within any sort of recognizable timeline, given how the rollout concert yesterday was clunky at best. But we're still going to get singles. This pairs Kanye with Fivio Foreign again, and Alicia Keys, which did initially kind of surprise me, but they've worked together for years. He did produce You Don't Know My Name. I mean, it's kind of a shame that whatever happened in the production booth here can't remotely match that, as Alicia Keys' vocals sound processed and compressed around the bassy drill production, and a melody crushed into weedy slurry alongside uncredited Playboi Carti ad-libs. It turns out the Chainsmokers co-produced this. I can kinda tell. Alright, not exactly a good sign. Not really helped by Fivio Foreign's verse basically being fine, but not all that distinctive or punchy outside of the I Run New York sentiments, which Kanye West then echoes despite being a Chicago artist and even saying he's gonna try to buy the Chicago Bulls. Yeah, Adam Silver and the ownership group is never gonna let that happen, especially with that storied franchise and, let's face it, Kanye, your reputation. But the feel of some of his bragging here is just kind of off. Not only does Kanye not sound all that vibrant in his delivery, but he's talking about having Justin LeBoy turn people's lives into memes, skating past how he's damn near a meme himself. Talking about being at peace with Drake, but skating past any connection with Jay-Z and all the New York flexing. But what I find most telling are the veiled shots at the Kardashians, and saying that he'll pull up with 100 goons at SNL. Now, as much as Kanye has beefed with that show before in his bars, I'm sorry, it comes across corny as hell to keep referencing Pete Davidson. It honestly just brings the entire song down to elevate itself to mythic heights, and just exposes how it's neither not all that interesting nor good. But speaking of which, number 34, Worst Day by Future.
Put my mind at ease. I bought y'all these gifts, tearing your heart all in pieces. Try to pass out new whips, yeah, but all this one is me.
I knew it was gonna be a bad sign when they opened up the music video to this song with Kevin Samuels in it. I said this on Twitter a little bit ago. It's kind of like knowing who Jordan Peterson is, and that you're gonna get this dreadful sinking feeling that as their cultural relevance increases, you know that anyone who takes them remotely seriously will be insufferable as all hell. Hell, putting his brand of toxicity in the same context of Future might even be too on the nose. Anyway, it doesn't really impact the song that much on the surface, which is Future whining about how Valentine's Day is the worst day because he has to pay attention to too many women, and he can't placate placate them just by providing expensive gifts, because they actually want some time, and he just can't be bothered that much. Now, it would be easy to consider all this a joke. A song like Tupac's I Get Around, it's precisely that, and it works, and it's great. But that's not how this is framed, with the solemn pianos and the downbeat guitar and surprisingly up-tempo percussion, which sets up the vibe that you're actually supposed to take Future's plight somewhat seriously, or dare I even say sympathize, and ignore the fact that he apparently can't keep his dick in his pants time and time again. But you know, if you actually read deeper into what Kevin Samuels talks about, which I unfortunately have, in terms of the whole conservative coding of the sexual marketplace with its value hierarchies and encouraging black men to take multiple mistresses, all while quietly dodging the accountability with the responsibility for everyone except himself, I'm more inclined to believe that they just believe this, with enough of an ironic dodge to claim otherwise. I mean, it wouldn't be all that surprising from Future. And when you don't even have the decency to make your toxicity or your melodrama all that fun, it comes across like Future attempting to smuggle in some manosphere bullshit with this. Shame he had to use some otherwise good production, but it doesn't stop this from being trash. Number 21, The Joker and the Queen by Ed Sheeran featuring Taylor Swift.
In me, the Joker and the Queen.
I mean, I get exactly why Sheeran and his team are pushing this as the next single. Even if Bad Habits and Shivers performed relatively well, Overpass Graffiti did not. And why go for anything else on the album that might take a chance or be actually good when you can ship the boring, tepid ballad with the big remix and the guest feature, and that'll inevitably work like gangbusters. Full disclosure, this is not one of the songs I liked on Equal, so I wasn't expecting much out of this remix, and at least it's better, but not by much. Part of the problem is that Ed Sheeran and Taylor Swift have never had that much chemistry in their duets, and that discrepancy of presence is really noticeable here, where Ed Sheeran is leaning into his painfully weak upper register, and Taylor's not just louder, she kind of takes over the entire song, and that means the vulnerability implied by her verse just does not resonate in contrast with Ed Sheeran. And that doesn't make it bad per se. The production's tasteful, kind of minimalist, I like the strings on the instrumental, but it can't overcome the lack of balance at the core, and even by the standards of Ed Sheeran ballads, I'm not gonna care about this. Just saying. Number 20, Bussin by Nicki Minaj and Lil Baby.
On my wrist hat, I ain't at the bus stop, but my niggas bus back. VS's but bussin', ass so fat, it's but bussin', back so full, it's but bussin', driving foreigns, bitches bussin'.
There were so many people that were so surprised that I genuinely liked the collab between Nicki Minaj and Lil Baby last week with Do We Have a Problem? Maybe it's because I built up a reputation of not really liking Nicki as much in comparison with their peers. That's probably fair, but it's more because I have heard her potential, and it's rarely realized to the extent that it could be. Even Do We Have a Problem kind of falls a little in this territory with the final verse. Now, I did hear this follow-up was substantially worse, and wow, it's not a good thing that the first thing that springs to mind with this is Fifi with 6ix9ine, with a clanking, painfully cheap-sounding production, short on melody, and with some really poor vocal pickups that just sound really canned. Even worse is the general structure of these bars. Not only does the flat delivery also remind me way too much of Fifi, they're even interpolating the song, it appears the general method behind these lyrics is stuttering to fill up space, the definition of phoning it in that flies in the face of what both rappers have been proven to deliver. And we know that because they just did last week. Now, to their credit, the rapping from Lil Baby at least feels a bit more balanced and tight in how he and Nicki trade off flows. I like that. But then when you realize it's all in the service of brand name porn, I just check out. If you're not gonna say anything and your stylism also sucks, I got no use for this. It sounds like a B-side that someone's management convinced them to release regardless. And yeah, it sucks. Next. And finally, number 15, MAMIII by Becky G and Karol G. I'll admit I'm kind of stunned this blew up as big as it did. In Latin America, both these artists are closer to household names, but to get this sort of penetration stateside for a debut that's all in Spanish had me wondering how this worked, especially as the streaming is just enormous. And after listening to it, I'm still not sure I get it. The spare acoustic line that breaks into the chalky but otherwise stock reggae percussion with hints of a thicker bass line, some okay chemistry between our duo as they blow off some guys. And that's about it? I've seen some folks call this kind of cruel and being so direct, but honestly I don't buy that, given what I've heard from some of their male counterparts in reggaeton and what they've gotten away with. But I think my larger criticism is that the production doesn't give them more to amplify their impact. It comes across a little stodgy and flat, a lot of dismissive smolder, but not a lot of impact. Also, and I'll fully admit I don't have the greatest depth when it comes to reggaeton, so I might be off with this. Why does this sound a little bit dated to me? I mean, beyond that, I don't dislike it, but I'm not hearing what's gonna stick with me more deeply, or what's gonna stick on the charts for next week, so just kinda okay, at best. And that's our week. I honestly wish I liked a lot more than I do here, because I was not impressed by the majority of our debuts. Let's get the worst out of the way first. It's Worst Day by Future for being completely noxious and wasting some okay production, with dishonorable mention going to Bussin by Nicki Minaj and Lil Baby for utterly shit production and not doing anything with it. But the best of the week? Yeah, Closer by Saweetie and H.E.R is just running away with that. But honorable mention, kind of a toss-up, but I'm actually gonna give it to Stay Alive by Jungkook, if only because there might be the most going on with the song that I actually kind of like and appreciate, and even then, kind of compromised. I'm not sure how much I would go back. Next week, hopefully something better, depending on what actually sticks around here. We'll have to see. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.